Welcome to the Formission Podcast. I'm your host, David Kenty, and we're so glad you could join us today as we delve into the depths of Christian discipleship. Well, Formission is a discipleship initiative of the Pentecostal Assemblies of Newfoundland and Labrador. It is our hope that no matter where you're listening from, you can take this content that you've heard today and apply it to your local church context. So let's get to it. Well, welcome to the very first Formission Podcast of this year. A special time as well, because this is the very first video cast that we're doing, and it's also special because I'm joined by the General Superintendent of the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada, Dr. David Wells. Am I correct in that?
On a good day, yeah.
On a good day. David, you were recently re-elected as the General Superintendent in Montreal. April, was it?
Yeah, early May. So I've had the privilege of serving for 2 4-year terms, and now we're into our third. So excited about that. Have good, strong sense of direction and vision. So, ready to go, and got a great team around me. So away we go.
Excellent. As you know, this is for the Formission Initiative as part of the Pentecostal Assemblies in Newfoundland and Labrador, and part of Formission is our emphasis on discipleship within the local church, not only for pastors, but also for lay people as well. For you, having done studies and having pastored and being at the executive level, what is Christian discipleship for you?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to really commend PONL for continuing a strong focus on disciple making. I've cooperated with the gang here actually for several decades now in the whole question of disciple making and the processes that are being followed. So first of all, a strong commendation for that ongoing initiative. And, our mission is to make disciplined followers of Jesus. So you better think it through a little bit about what is that. I've come to peace that first of all, it's an intentional process, because it is our mission. So there needs to be this intentionality that we make disciples. And with that, then you better understand what is a disciple. And so to me, disciple making is first of all, a spirit-empowered process. So intentional, spirit-empowered in the sense that, we are talking about lives being transformed, about being shaped into the image of Jesus. Well, I can't do that in my own strength. I couldn't even get my kids to clean up their bedroom. Better yet, try to transform a person's life. So, it does take spirit empowerment to see that happen. It's the Spirit that brings change in people's lives. And I think as Pentecostals, we need to park on that even a little bit more than we do. There is a difference about what the dynamic of the Spirit brings to making disciples. So this intentional, spirit-empowered process, it's a relational process. So we are talking about people willing to share their lives with others so that they can see what it looks like to, like Paul says in Thessalonians, we were happy not only to share with you the gospel, but our lives as well, because that's what it takes to make disciples. So it's this sharing of life over a time period. There's a process to it. And none of us is totally there yet. I'm not totally there yet. You're not, I'm assuming.
Definitely not.
I'll check with your wife. And,
yeah, you have to check with her.
You check with mine.
I'm pretty sure that's a no on my part.
Yeah. So, the process, it's important to think through right from the very beginning when somebody doesn't even yet know Jesus. That's part of the disciple-making process, and it is relational. So it's how do you first connect with people that don't know Jesus, from Justin Trudeau? They don't know that,
Yeah.
How do you connect with people right through there, see people come to faith? How do you help them grow through all the stages of maturity? All of this is part of the relationally based process. And so, it is important to think it through in an intentional way.
And you kind of touched on that a little bit. It starts prior to really that conversion experience. So in a way, you're saying that discipleship is even before they have made a full-on kind of commitment. You're already starting in that journey along. Is that a dynamic shift from where we've been in years past, where we've said, we kind of believe without saying discipleship sort of starts after you come to the altar and you say the prayer and do all that stuff. Have you seen, is that a shift there?
Yeah, I do believe that the danger has been that when you see it just afterwards, then we tend to make it programmatic. Now you're going to be part of our discipleship program.
Okay, yeah.
And it's almost always then understood to be in a room somewhere for a certain period of time, a quarter or certain number of meetings. So I appreciate initiatives that help us in the journey of making disciples that, say, an alpha or something, you could use dozens of programs, but the reality is they have their benefit. But to understand, they're not discipleship per se. Disciple making is this long-term, relationally based process, the Spirit helping us to see people right from before knowing Jesus all the way through to the final day. And so with that in mind, I think in the Pentecostal world, we've been somewhat content to know we had the programs and we had the rooms booked and we had a certain number of people coming.
Right.
Did that always help us to make disciples? That's a good question, I think, and we need to evaluate, because the reality is and my challenge to leaders especially would be, you don't really understand what it takes to make a disciple in Canada unless you start at the front end by knowing people that don't even know Jesus right now and understand some of the concepts they have about spirituality and about who Jesus is, and on the list goes. You don't really understand discipleship in the light of people who do know Jesus but live in totally different contexts than what, say, I know as a Christian leader, where my salary is paid by, right now, a fellowship of churches, but in a local church, and you can get so boxed off into that world that, to you, discipleship is people come to us, we get them in a room, we tell them how to further live. What does it look like to go be among and walk alongside of people who, all the way from don't know Jesus at all, right through to even some of the folks that are in the life of our church, but do you know what they're living through in their professional world or in the context that they're addressing? And so that's why, if we're following Jesus as our leader in disciple making, he went and lived among, full of grace and truth. That's how he made disciples.
Yeah, and you look at the life of Jesus himself and going into these situations where he is among the tax collectors. He is with the outcasts of the outcasts of the outcasts, the people nobody wanted to touch. And he started with this ragtag group of people that didn't really fully click and understand with why and how he came. And through that process, that 3-year process, and then at Pentecost when the Spirit came, it was just kind of, everything started to sort of light up. But it took that 3 years to get to that point, and even then they still needed the Spirit to come in and illuminate them, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, I was strongly shaped by leaders who, first of all, engaged me in a relational process as a young person in faith, as a young leader later on, this ongoing mentorship and being made a disciple by people who invested their time. But they also pointed me towards understandings of ministry through books like Master Plan of Evangelism by Coleman or Training of the 12 by Bruce. And, they kept pointing me towards, now, how did Jesus go about ministering? What was his priorities? So I remember for early part of my ministry, I was in the Gospels every day, and I developed these whole manuals about, I called it Ministry Jesus Style, and it was just for my own benefit over 3 years, going through a harmony of the Gospels and tracking and just making notes of, if Jesus physically lived in Canada today, how would he spend his time, his energy, and his money? So, it's kind of, out of that came this understanding of intentionality about making disciples and how he went about it, what he gave the best of his time to. And here, all these years later, I'm still trying to live out those values, albeit, leading number of churches. And, you could easily be locked in an office, or some people call it ivory tower. Well, I'd rather lead from the streets than from the office, partly because of my commitment to disciple making.
Right.
It's like, I've got to know people who don't know Jesus. I've got to be with them. I've got to understand what makes them click, and why is it that they aren't becoming followers of Jesus. I've got to have real names to tell you about, real stories, you see, and all the way through to people that are new in faith and people that are struggling, still broken, all the way through to still having mentors myself that inspire me even today.
Why do we get so clicked into that idea that I can sit in my church and I don't have to go out and actually know somebody who's not saved or know somebody who's not a Christian? Like, it's very easy to get into that program of discipleship, but what is it in ourselves that we say, I don't need to do that?
Well, I don't think anyone, again, intentionally says, I don't want to have people in my life. I don't, I think I sometimes talk about the vortex of the existing church. And, you don't have to follow me around much or hear me speak, that I believe in the church and I believe in what we do in visible, disciple-making communities. But even in our own circles, we're using the phraseology more visible, disciple-making communities than just church. Because church has ended up being defined by more the institution, more the building, more the structure that we've established. Now, there's a lot of good things that go on in the life of the church. There's a lot of value to dynamic worship gatherings and word-based teaching, don't get me wrong, and all those things. But it has to be led by people that know that that's not it in the end. It is about 24/7. It is about bringing Jesus to people. And if I don't model that, I'll be frank, I don't feel I have the credibility to then stand up in front of a group of fellow believers and tell them, now go make disciples and go win your neighbors, but I don't have a clue who mine are, or I don't know what the struggle of that is, or the different views of spirituality we're now dealing with in Canada. If I can't authoritatively tell you about people in my life where I'm learning those lessons, what right do I have to get behind a pulpit and get all, and tell people to do what I'm not doing?
Right.
I just think it's a credibility issue.
Yeah. Thank you for joining our podcast today. If you've enjoyed our content, you can subscribe to the podcast by clicking the subscribe button in iTunes. If you're looking for more information about Formission or want more tools to better facilitate discipleship in your own church community, you can go to our website at www.formission.org. Hope to see you back next week.